been thinking about the call to mission, the call to serve the gospel in this world, and a story that really has sort of embedded itself in my own life, my own mind, my own heart, has been an experience of mine actually that I don't think I've ever shared. I may have told one or two people, but I honestly don't think in over 10 years of preaching, I don't think I've shared this even in a sermon. But when I first finished studying the scriptures on the School of Biblical Studies at the King's Lodge in Nuneaton with YWAM, which was the school really that kind of captured my imagination for a life of mission and calling and purpose and meaning and all of those things. I finished the 9-month school. We'd gone through the Bible 5 times in different capacities and learnt tools of inductive Bible study, interpretive skills, hermeneutical technique that was faithful to good evangelical Bible reading. And after the school, I went on a 3-week outreach to Ghana. And when we lived in Cardiff, Rachel and I, in the 90s, we met a Ghanaian family, and Isaac, the husband, was studying for his PhD at Cardiff University. He was a pastor in Ghana, and I think he was doing something theological. But anyway, we made a friendship, and I really liked him. We just got on really well. And by the time I came to the end of my School of Biblical Studies as a student, this is the school that I staffed and then led and then took to Cairo in Egypt in one of its first sort of formation. I thought, I'll do an outreach. I'll go on outreach to Ghana. And that meant that after the Bible school that I finished, I went to Ghana for 3 weeks, leaving Rachel with 3 young children, which was good for me, but probably not so good for her. That's another story, and that's probably why you've noticed that I wear a signet ring with 3 stones in, to remind myself that I have 3 children. Not that I need remembering, but Rachel bought it for me and said, don't do that again. But I went to Ghana for 3 weeks, and the first 10 days was teaching on 4 minor prophets, and that was on the School of Biblical Studies in Ghana. 4 minor prophets, including Amos and Jonah, and I can't remember the other 2. That was 10 days, and then 10 days I would go to my Ghanaian friend that I'd met in Cardiff, and I would stay with him and his family and his lovely wife and beautiful children, and preach at his church. And it was, I mean, I look back now, the preaching was rubbish, honestly. At that point I was more of a teacher than a preacher, but during the 4 sessions of the 4 minor prophets, including Amos and Jonah, I was basically teaching about the sovereignty of God over the nations, as one of the strands that I was doing. Oh yeah, I was waxing lyrical about the sovereignty of God over the nations and how he commands the past, the present and the future, how God is outside of time and yet in time, and all of these dynamics that were going on and coming out through the pages of the prophets. And it was brilliant. Not my teaching, but the prophets were brilliant. They were just wonderful. And I booked my ticket to go north, and it was something like, gosh, it was a coach journey. It was 18 hours, I think it took. It was meant to take 12. Anyway, I bought my ticket, went north on the coach, and I was the only white person on this coach for the whole journey. Now, it's not that that's a problem, but I felt this is my second African experience, and I felt vulnerable. Towards the end of the journey, where I thought, not towards the end, actually probably approaching halfway, but where I thought we were coming to the end was my bottle of water had about this much water in it, and I was in trouble. Now I've got a an autoimmune condition called Crohn's disease, and I've had that since 1995. And it's been on and off, and in the early years it was just awful. It's a miracle I've not had surgery. On the bus journey up north, the coach, which had chickens and goats in it and on it, broke down, and we stopped in utter pitch black darkness, and everyone got off the bus, and I thought I was in real trouble. There's a big wasp just flying by me now, and I got off, and I had, as I say, this much water. And of course with Crohn's, I'm not going to go into the details of Crohn's, you can Google that or go to the Crohn's UK website, but I thought, I could be in trouble here. I've got no mobile phone, because it was sort of, well, it was pre the kind of stuff that we're used to today, let's say, and I had none of that. And there were mosquitoes flying around, and I was the only white face, and I felt isolated and vulnerable, even though there were so many friendly Ghanaians there. And I started to panic after about an hour of this coach stopping, after breaking down, because I felt like I heard God say, "Do you really trust that I am sovereign?" And I was like, what? Okay, here I am, in goodness knows where, somewhere in Ghana, broken down, locked down like we are now, with people using all sorts of tools to try and get this engine sorted out, and there was a locked wheel that had to come off as well, and there were people everywhere milling about, loads of people just sat watching and chilled out and relaxed because that's what they do. But I, of course, being British and Western and used to, well, lights at night time for a start, in that part of the, at that time of night, for example, it was just, there was lots of things to alienate me, and so I began to panic, and I distinctly heard God say, "Do you trust my sovereignty? Do you believe I'm sovereign?" And I didn't say yes straight away because I couldn't believe it, but I got to a moment where I thought, do you know what? I have to believe what I teach. I have to believe what I preach. And I don't know, 20 or 30 minutes later, I was wrestling. I was really wrestling with God back and forth. This is a question of my own faith, of my own identity, of my own integrity. I'd just been teaching 4 minor prophets, for goodness sake, to Bible students and missionaries in Accra in Ghana at the YWAM base. This was an embarrassing scenario, and I got to the point where I said, through gritted teeth, in desperation, yes, Lord, I do trust your sovereignty. And I kid you not, I literally kid you not, the shout went up that the bus was fixed the moment I said that, the moment I articulated the battle that had been taking place within me. And we all got back on the bus. A couple more hours, I don't know, 3 or 4 more hours. We got there, and Isaac, who had been waiting way past the original arrival time, graciously met me and looked after me. But that was my lesson on the sovereignty of God, and that will never leave me.